I'm coming to you today to tell you with full transparency that this is not the video that I was intending to make. I messed up. I started reading A Certain Hunger by Chelsea Summers, and I started thinking about it, and I looked at my holds list at the library, I looked at my TBR, and I thought, I could do a video where I read books about, like, women who eat people. That'd be fun. A little bit of cannibalism. Halloween's coming up. So I picked out 4 books, and I started reading them. One of the books was about cannibalism. One of the books was not about cannibalism at all. Literally at all, it's not about cannibalism. The other 2 books, it's the twist that they're about cannibalism. That's the whole surprise. That's the spoiler. How am I supposed to make a video where I tell you the books that I'm reading if the spoiler is the title of the video? So we've scrapped it. We haven't scrapped it. We're pivoting. And instead we're going to read books about women doing deranged shit. Depravity. Insanity, lunacy. That's the theme of this video. So I'm keeping A Certain Hunger because I already fucking read it and I already recorded myself reading it. So these are the books that I have for that topic. This is a different selection because the first one was terrible. I don't know. I completely messed that up. On the top here is A Certain Hunger. This is about a woman who eats people. It was for the other video, but it fits with this one. Out by Natsuo Kirino. This, I think, but I really don't know, is about a group of women and one of them kills her husband. And it's about the aftermath of that and them trying to, like, cover up the crime, maybe. The Vegetarian, I have already read. This is truly just about a woman's descent into madness. And finally, I have All's Well by Mona Awad, which is about a theater professor directing a production of a Shakespeare play, and she is suffering from chronic pain. And I think crazy shit happens in this. If I'm wrong about this book, I'm not taking the blame for that. We are blaming the Goodreads reviews that said that this is about crazy women doing crazy shit. I cannot possibly just pick another book for this video. I'm reading this. I'm talking about this. I don't care if it doesn't fit the theme, okay? We're not pivoting again. I'm going to leave it up to past me, who recorded myself reviewing A Certain Hunger already. If I'm talking a lot about cannibalism, if I'm making it seem like this is a video about cannibalism, that's because at the time I recorded it a week ago, it was. And I'm sorry, I didn't do a good job vetting the books. I kind of just picked them willy-nilly, and that's my bad. I'm gonna leave it up to me from a week ago. Goodbye. Hello, I'm here to give you an update about A Certain Hunger, and by an update I mean I've finished it, and I'm here to tell you everything that happens in it, and then I'm going to tell you what I think about it, and I'm going to try to keep the spoilers just to the summary section. So A Certain Hunger is told from the perspective of a 50-something-year-old food critic, and she is writing from prison after she has been sentenced to, I think, life for killing a whole bunch of men and eating them. So it begins with her telling the story of the most recent man that she's killed. This is a man that she met in a hotel bar, went on a couple of dates with, and then ended up taking to what she says is her friend's vacation home, but is actually just a house that she has broken into. And while they're there, she cooks him a delicious meal because she's a foodie in an annoying way, but I'll get into that later. And then she stabs him with an ice pick and sets the house ablaze. She doesn't actually eat this man, which is interesting when we go back and hear about the other men that she's killed in her life, because she's eating them. After she tells that story, it starts jumping around through her life, talking about her family and her time in university and her career as a food critic, and she also identifies herself at this point as a psychopath. She's very unfeeling, like her mother dies of cancer and she just doesn't really care. After we get a little bit of context, she then starts talking about her time in Italy. She loves Italian food and Italian people, and she's a fucking food critic, which is so relentless in this book. So she goes to Italy a lot, and whenever she goes to Italy, she meets up with this man named Marco. And after a while, she finds out that Marco is leading this kind of double life where he has her as a mistress, but then also is like a married Orthodox Jewish butcher in Rome. They meet up like at least once a year over many years. And then at one point, Marco is like, no, like I gotta be committed to my wife and my religion. Like I can't keep doing this with you. So she starts seeing another man in Italy named Giovanni. And Giovanni is this vegan guy. He's kind of an asshole. They are in the car together driving home from some party, and Giovanni's pissed about something and she's drunk. He's driving the car and they feel a little bump. It's not like a big bump, but he gets out to see what happened, and when he gets out, she slides into the driver's seat and just drives off because he's yelling at her and she just wants to get away from him. She's annoyed. She ends up regretting this because she has left him alone on this dark mountain road in Italy in the middle of the night, and so she turns back to go get him and is kind of dreading getting him because obviously he's going to be really fucking mad that she's abandoned him. And when she gets finds him. He's in the headlights. Instead of stopping, she slams on the gas, and he flips over the car and ends up impaled on some like fence behind her. She is not that affected by this. Again, she does identify herself as a psychopath. She sees his liver and cuts it out of his body, gets it professionally butchered or treated or whatever you have to do with the liver, and then eats it and thinks that it's delicious. Then a few years pass. She's not like driven by this need to kill or by this need to consume human flesh. It's not like this is like prevalent through her life. It's just she sometimes gets the idea in her head that she needs to kill a man and eat him, and then she very meticulously plans it out. Unlike Giovanni, every other murder is very, very, very premeditated. The next man that she kills is a former boss of hers. They had a relationship, and then he cheated on her with her assistant. She ends up leaving that company, and he ended up marrying the assistant and having children and then divorcing this assistant. For some reason that I can't really remember because I didn't really like this book, she looks him up and finds out that he ended up marrying the assistant and divorcing her, and she decides to manufacture like running into him, meeting him just on the street. Oh my god, this is so crazy. I haven't seen you in so long. The first time that they have sex, she decides he has to die, and so she plans it very meticulously. She doses him with Xanax, after, like cooks him a meal and doses him with Xanax. He obviously falls asleep. She turns off all of the carbon monoxide detectors in his house, and then, I don't know, turns the stove on or something. It was not really clear. Or maybe it was, and I just breezed past it. And he dies of carbon monoxide poisoning. She then cuts off his butt and then, like, lets his dogs into the room. So it seems like he just died of carbon monoxide poisoning and his dogs ate him. And it's not, like, a suspicious death. Then some more years pass, and she ends up losing her job. Her former boss at this company, he had left years before she lost her job. I think they had some sort of relationship, or maybe not. She meets up with him, and she decides he's got to be the next one to die. He's a pretty wealthy man, and he has like a yacht or a boat of some sort. So she takes him out onto the boat and makes him a delicious meal, as she always does with all these men, and poisons him. She gives him some fig, which is something that he's allergic to, and then she pushes him over the side of the boat, hoping beyond hope that he inhales some water, and so it seems like he has drowned. And he puts up a fight, and it's probably the tensest part of a book that is not very tense, considering it is about a serial killer and like cannibalism. He is fighting to survive. Like his throat is closing up. He can't breathe, obviously, but he is trying to get up into the boat, and she is trying to get him into the water so he inhales some water before he succumbs to the anaphylaxis. She does end up succeeding, and through a gruesome struggle, cuts out his tongue and wraps it up to eat it. She then realizes that her original plan, she is, again, so meticulous with her planning, like very, very detailed. Her original plan isn't going to work because the boat has GPS on it. She had originally thought to motor the boat out into the wide open ocean and say that he had fallen overboard so that they don't search the actual area where his body was. She just wanted it to be a few days before his body turned up so that the tongue that she had cut out wouldn't stink of foul play. It would seem like it was fish. But she can't do that because the Coast Guard is going to be able to see that she had been sitting in this bay for like hours as they ate their meal and as she killed and then tore the tongue out of this guy, and they're going to search the bay and they're going to find him. So she ends up anchoring right there where she is and spending the night. And then in the morning, she calls the Coast Guard and says, I woke up and he was gone. Like, I have no idea where he is. She plays the part of like a confused girlfriend. Everything ends up going fine. They don't find the body, I think, for many days, or maybe they don't find it at all. Nothing more comes of that. And then it kind of all comes to a head with the man that she has always wanted to kill the most, I think, and that is Marco, the Orthodox Jewish butcher from Italy. They had seen each other intermittently through the years, but every once in a while, Marco would decide that he is devoted to his wife and his religion and would refuse to see her. This time, she kind of pitches to the magazine that she's writing for a story about this Italian Orthodox butcher, and she goes to like interview him, check out his butchering facility, and write a story on him. And the entire time that she's there, he is very much rejecting her advances and like making sure that there's always someone else with them at all times. He's not like laughing at her jokes, like he's keeping her at a distance. And she is pissed about this because she wants to like have an excuse to go into his butcher shop with him in the middle of the night with the pretense of having sex so that she can like fully like hang him up on the butchering stuff and butcher him in there. It does end up happening. She somehow, I don't know, he just like all of a sudden a flip switches and he's like, I need you. And they go into the butcher shop and I think she just stabs him a bunch of times and she takes his heart and his stomach. It's this whole thing. She tries to follow like kosher butchering protocols, which is, you know, sort of interesting in a way. This book is very gruesome, but only like a few times. And I don't know, it's very detached. So while she is literally hanging up a man and butchering him, I didn't really care all that much. Like I wasn't all that grossed out by it. Then it catches up to the present day where she is paranoid that she's going to be caught for the first murder that I talked about, the most recent murder that she did, that guy in the house that she had burned down. She's not anxious about this at all because she's planned it so well until the police call her and request for her to come down and talk to them. She just deletes this message and tries to ignore it, but she can't, of course. She's like riddled with paranoia. She ends up being interviewed by them and she knows that they have something on her, but she has no idea what. She goes over it again and again and again, and she cannot figure out what it is that she has missed, what she's left behind. This interview that she has really messes her up, and she goes to visit her only friend, Emma, who is a woman that she had met in university, and they had this kind of like interesting relationship. Emma is like an agoraphobic painter. Everyone's so fucking eccentric in this book. So she goes to Emma's apartment and they get drunk and she wants to tell Emma everything. She wants to tell her about this man that she thinks she's going to get caught for killing. She wants to tell her about every other man, but she holds back. Except she doesn't know if she does hold back. She wakes up the next morning after getting plastered and has no idea what she's told Emma. And over time, she becomes convinced that she has confessed to Emma and that Emma has gone to the police because the police are still contacting her. She is so paranoid. She's thinking that she's hearing clicking on her phone, like that she's being tapped. And this paranoia drives her crazy. It's the most emotion she ever shows throughout the entire book. Through all of these murders, what drives her insane is thinking that Emma has betrayed her. So she goes to Emma's apartment to kill her, but she doesn't end up killing her, of course, because some silent alarms have been tripped. So as she goes to slam the axe down on the bed, she realizes, one, it's not Emma in the bed, it's just a bunch of pillows, and then the lights turn on and the police are like, put your hands up. We learn kind of a little bit anticlimactically that the thing that had cinched her, why the police knew that she was the person who did this, is a receipt. She thought that the whole house had burnt down, and it had, but she had thrown a receipt into a metal garbage can, and it had been protected from the flame and the heat, and it left a receipt for where she got her meat, the butcher where she got her meat. A little bit of irony for you. While she's in prison, the main thing on her mind is trying to figure out if she had confessed to Emma. Emma tells the police that she didn't tell her anything. She testifies that she had no idea what had happened, that no confession was made, but the main character, who I haven't told you the name of for some reason, her name's Dorothy. Dorothy is certain that Emma knew and that Emma betrayed her. It ends with this useless story about a man that she had fallen in love with that I'm not even going to get into because it's boring and stupid. It ends more so with her opening a letter Emma has sent her. And this I have a fucking problem with because she says that Emma has sent her letter after letter after letter since she's been in prison, but she's so upset with her, cannot forgive her, so she doesn't open any of the letters. She's had so many letters, she just throws them right into the trash. The first letter that she decides to open says, you told me everything I didn't tell. What, the first random letter that you open? What, has every letter she sent said that? That's fucking stupid. I'm pissed about that. But we learn Emma knew and didn't betray her. That is the book. That's the plot of the book. I'm done talking about the plot of the book. Now I'm going to talk about how I feel about the book, and I'm going to try not to spoil it. I'm going to do a really good job of not spoiling it, I think, actually. When I started this book, I thought I was going to like it, but not love it. At the end, I actually found it really fucking taxing and tedious and not good. I genuinely disliked this, even though it is about an insane woman. It's kind of horror in a way. There's like violence and a little bit of tension. It's just like, I don't know. I just really didn't think it was good. Most of this book is going off on these little side tangents about like the history of the cleaver, the protocols of kosher butchering, what counts as a serial killer under the FBI's definition. Like, it's like all these little tidbits and facts and information that I found so fucking boring. The book is not well written enough to do that. What I'm in it for, and what the writer knows I'm in it for, is like the violence and the horror and the killings. And so when we finally go through all of this irritating, tedious, like, information that has truly no relevance, it then is super brief and to the point when actual plot points happen. There is actually very little plot in this book. It's like little tiny bits of plot sprinkled in between random facts and sprinkled in between endless food similes and food descriptions. This is a problem that I've had in the past with books that have a central food motif, where they want food to be so central. It's like a foodie thing where it's like all these ridiculously fancy foods they're describing that I have no frame of reference for because I'm a regular person. I don't know what fucking duck liver tastes like, and I don't care to hear you describe it. It often will just evolve into like listing elegant and luxurious foods that I don't care about. I think that there is truly a very difficult line to walk with a central food theme where it's hard to keep it central while also making it interesting. And I have not found anybody that makes it interesting. I think that most of y'all are out here writing lists of foods and saying food similes. Everything is like a food. I'm tired of it. I was so tired of it reading this book. I felt like there was a little bit of an idea for a book, and then a lot of food similes, and then just some Google searches that was somehow supplemented the rest of it. It might seem like there is a strong plot because I've only told you the plot, right? But this, like I said, is so brief when it actually gets to these parts because it knows that you want that, and it's not going to reward you. It's not going to give you what you want. I hated it. It was okay. I didn't actually hate it. There are some things that I liked about it. I liked the cold and calculated voice of this woman, like psychopath. And I also liked that she was allowed what male killers are allowed, which is like just killing to kill. Like, she didn't have some traumatic past or backstory or like something that really drove her to do this, like some heartbreaking story where like we have to feel empathy for her. She was allowed what a male serial killer gets: senseless murder. And I think that that was fun. And in some ways it was unique. The rest of the book I just didn't like. I just thought if it was more plot, it would have been better. But even then, I don't think that the writing was good enough to make this much more than what it ended up being. So I will say I am pretty disappointed in this because look at that cover. That is one of the most beautiful covers of a book I've ever seen in my fucking life. I kind of hate the font, but I can get over it because of this painting. I can also get over this. We need to stop doing that. Give me the full cover. Don't stop cutting a few centimeters off here. That's so stupid. For a book with such an insane plot, it's crazy how bored I was reading this. If you're okay with like mediocre writing and almost nothing happening, you might enjoy this. I certainly didn't. I have finished The Vegetarian, and I'll be honest with you, I finished this like a week ago, and I also was not really, I think, in the right headspace to be reading it because it felt like there was so much in here that I just missed. I think it was really good. I know it was really good. I just know that I'm not grasping all of the symbolism that's present here, and I'm kind of disappointed in myself for that, and I think that I might end up rereading it one day. The Vegetarian was originally published in South Korea in, I think, 2007 as 3 little novellas, all centering around the same woman, Young Hae. So each chapter is from a different character's perspective, the first one being Young Hae's husband, and it begins with him watching her throw out all the meat in the house because she's had some dreams, some nightmares that make it impossible for her to stomach even the idea of eating meat. And he's enraged by this because he's a little misogynistic pig and he wants his wife to cook meat dinners for him when he gets home from his job. He really strongly believes in social norms and she defies many of these expectations of her. The main one being that she doesn't like wearing a bra. And this endlessly embarrasses and irritates him, and it comes to a head when he goes for dinner with his bosses and she's there and she takes off her coat. She's very clearly not wearing a bra, and he is watching everyone at the table notice and judge her for this, and he's absolutely humiliated by it. And this just gets worse and worse over the dinner as she refuses all of the meals there that have meat in them, which is almost everything. The people at the table are shocked by this. It becomes like a point of conversation, her being a vegetarian. It's very over the top. They're like, oh my God, I've heard of vegetarians, but I never knew that someone actually could be one. I've never met a vegetarian before. It's kind of a little bit silly and a little bit ridiculous, but also it's getting the point across. Throughout this chapter, he's just enraged by her the entire time. It's that very like old school classic misogyny that I feel like I don't see often anymore, where he's like, women should be seen and not heard. I need my wife to make me dinner every time by the time I get home from work. Like, it's ridiculous, but also obviously real. It's just like not really of this generation. It's like the misogyny that's like so ridiculous it's almost a joke. Like, okay, let me tell you a story. My mom just went to this course for her work, and she was there with a bunch of other women from her work, and the guy teaching the course was this like incredibly old man, and he said that he had been married for like 60 years, and her coworker was like, oh, I just got married like 3 weeks ago. And he said, 3 weeks ago? Why are you here? You should be in the kitchen. Not as a joke, like fully earnestly he said that. It's so incredibly ridiculously misogynistic that it's almost just like absurd. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean you've gotten this far in your life and that's what you think about women? Absolutely hilarious, and also so shocking and so horrible. That man should not be teaching a fucking course. He should be in a home. Anyway, that's the kind of misogyny we're dealing with the husband and his views on his wife. Her family is incredibly against her vegetarianism, and there is reason to be concerned because she is quickly becoming very, very ill. It seems like she's not really eating at all under the guise of not eating meat. She's thin, she's emaciated, she's clearly unwell. That's not why her family is concerned. Her family is concerned that she is going outside of social norms. So they have a dinner with her, and her abusive father basically pins her to the wall and shoves meat into her mouth as her refusal escalates and escalates. And this is like the breaking point. She spits it out, and she grabs a knife, and she slits her own wrist, and obviously is taken to the hospital and then institutionalized. In the hospital, she's very subdued and she's very quiet, and one day she escapes from her hospital bed, and her husband is concerned about his own embarrassment and humiliation and what she might be doing, not really worried about his wife, who is clearly incredibly unwell. He ends up finding her surrounded by an audience in the courtyard, shirt open, breasts bared to the sun, licking the wound on her arm and holding a dead bird in her hands. And that is where that chapter ends. The next chapter, which is from the perspective of Young Hai's brother-in-law, lets us know, it's like about a year after these events, lets us know that her husband has divorced her and she's now living on her own in an apartment away from him. Young Hai's brother-in-law is an artist, and he's also a fucking creep. He's a disgusting little man. He has this fantasy that it first seems as though his fantasy is about people with flowers painted on their bodies. We learn that this fantasy is very much about her, his sister-in-law, Young Hai, and it's also about him. He has become obsessed with her because he learned that she has this like specific birthmark on her butt cheek, and he cannot get this idea out of his head of her fucking birthmark. He just wants to have sex with her. That's really it. And he manages to manipulate this to happen under the guise of his artistry. So he goes to her apartment and asks her if she will participate in an art project that he's doing. He does not give her all of the details. There's not informed consent. He's just hoping to get her there and then slowly convince her to ramp it up more and more and more. And she is clearly still very unwell. She does not react to things in ways that you would expect. Like, he goes to her apartment and she is completely naked when he arrives, and she's not shocked or embarrassed by this. She just calmly puts clothes on. She agrees to go with him, and he makes her strip down, paints flowers on her, and records her, but it doesn't go farther than that. She seems to be okay with this, but again, like, can she really consent to what he's doing? He watches the video that he takes, and he realizes that he has to push this all the way. He has to see this through to its end. So he gets another man to have sex with her on camera with the flowers painted on them. So the person that he gets to come and help him is his artist friend. And again, there's no informed consent here. He just says that he needs his help with an art project and is he comfortable being on camera. The man is fine with being undressed and painted with flowers, but as this brother-in-law pushes it further and further and further, he gets more and more uncomfortable, despite the brother-in-law's insistence that this is not pornography, it's art, I promise. He is wanting them to, like, fully have sex. And the guy says no, and he leaves. But Young Hai is into it. She's, like, all fucking amped up. She tells her brother-in-law that she's very attracted to the man because of the flowers painted on him. She's feeling this attraction that she hasn't felt in years because of this. So the brother-in-law runs out, finds another artist friend, and gets her to paint flowers on him. Goes to Young Hai's apartment, sets up his camera, and they start having sex, and he ends up assaulting her. They fall asleep in the bed, and the next morning, her sister, this guy's fucking wife, comes in and finds them in bed together and watches this video of him assaulting her. She realizes that both of these people that she loves need serious help, and she has them both institutionalized. That's where that chapter ends, and then it switches perspective to Young Hai's sister. At this point, she has lost her husband and is single parenting her young son, and also her family is no longer having anything to do with Young Hai. She's the only one caring for her sister, who is kind of being shuttled around different mental institutions around Korea. Young Hai's condition has been deteriorating and quickly. She's completely emaciated, she won't eat anything, and she's convinced that the only nutrients that she needs is sunlight. So she spends most of her time at the window, baring her skin to the sun and absorbing the nutrients she thinks she has. She thinks that she's like a tree. The doctors have diagnosed her with anorexia and with schizophrenia, and they're quite frustrated with her refusal to be treated. They tell her sister that she is at a breaking point, that they need to insert a drip so that they can feed her, or they need to either do some surgery or like put her into a medically induced coma, some drastic step that I can't remember because I read this a week ago, that her sister does not want them to have to take. She goes again to visit Young Hai and tries to convince her to eat anything, just take a bite of something, and she won't do it. So the doctors come and try to insert this drip, and Young Hai fights back violently. She's tearing it out of her face, she's fighting against the doctors, there's blood, she's injuring people, and this book ends with the two of them in the ambulance together after this very tense scene, where her sister is kind of starting to empathize with and understand where Young Hai is coming from, as Young Hai is, in her mind, becoming a tree. With the sister's perspective, there's kind of a tone of like, is there anything that I could have done? Both with the two of them as adults, as Young Hai became more and more ill, but also thinking back to their childhood, because the sister knows that Young Hai's illness is really rooted in the abuse she suffered from their father, abuse that was really focused mainly on her and that the sister managed to avoid. Both this book and Young Hai's illness are centered in the abuse that she's received from men in her life and from the patriarchal society that she lives in. Okay, do you mind? It's about the loss of autonomy, both being a woman in this patriarchal society and from being ill. She has no control over anything, and so she takes control back through her illness, through refusing to eat. And all of these perspectives are people in her life who are trying to gain control over her, and she's resisting through this vegetarianism and through this refusal to eat. I think the messaging in this book is very clear, but it's also not heavy-handed, which is a hard line to walk, and she does it really well. It's beautifully written and wonderfully translated, and even though I feel like I only got a surface level reading of this because I was just not in the right headspace to read it critically, I still feel like I got a lot out of it, and I can tell how fantastically done it is. I think that I would benefit from rereading this because I want to get everything out of it. I feel like there's symbolism here that I missed. I feel like I didn't quite get the ending as much as I wish I had, but that I still love this book nonetheless. I thought that this was very quickly paced. It always felt like there was something happening, but not in a way that was like overbearing. It can be a very heavy read. It's disturbing and terrifying and so like real, like it's horrific but based in a reality that is awful to think about. So it can be kind of sickening because you feel like there's so much momentum pushing you through with such a quick plot, and then it's so horrible, like you just need to take a break. So I think this does benefit from having those long chapters where you can just like take a moment. Overall, it was just a really good book, and I highly recommend it, and I hope to revisit it because again, I just feel like there's stuff I'm missing that I want to get out of it. The next book I'm reading is All's Well by Mona Awad, and I will update you when I'm a little bit farther through it. Okay, so I've gotten through part 1 of All's Well, which has taken me to just about halfway through the book, and I have things to say about it. I'll start with telling you what it's about. This follows Miranda, who is a theater professor and a woman dealing with very intense chronic pain that no treatment is working for. And being in this chronic pain has alienated her from everyone in her life. She's divorced her husband. Her friend Grace, who is co-directing this play with her, is very distant because Grace kind of accused her of not necessarily making up her pain, but of the pain being all in her head. And her students don't really like her. Mainly, though, that's because she's really intent on doing this play, All's Well That Ends Well, instead of the play they want to do, which is Macbeth. Being in chronic pain, Miranda feels like the world is against her. She is paranoid that people think that she's faking. She puts thoughts into other people's head, and she also feels very disconnected from her body. It's a very medicalized thing to her. She's in a lot of fucking pain, and there's a lot of very intense descriptions of this pain. We learn that this pain is stemming from an injury where she fell off of a stage during a production of Macbeth. She had surgery on her hip, which led to nerve damage and has just kind of snowballed into this horrific pain in her back and her hip, and this stiffness and pain in her leg. There's pain like behind her knee. It's hard to straighten out her leg. It's hard to sit down. It's hard to stand up. She's also abusing pain meds and getting drunk while on these pain meds, which is not two things that mix very well for her. She goes to a bar and she gets drunk and has this weird experience with these 3 men. It's mainly an experience with one of the men, who's the middleweight man. It's the fat man, the thin man, and the middling man. So she has this experience with the middling man where he seems to know everything about her situation. Like, he looks at her and he can tell that she is in pain, and he kind of describes everything that's happened to her, saying like, you go to physiotherapists and nothing helps. They tell you to try ice, they tell you to try heat, they tell you to follow the pain. And though he's kind of telling the story of a generalized experience of chronic pain, he also at the end of it calls her by her first name. It's very strange. At the end of this, she drinks this golden potion that he gets from the bartender, and then wakes up and thinks that was pretty fucking weird. She's definitely losing her grip on reality, and she's certainly always in her head. And that is something that I'm going to complain about a little bit, because this book does this thing where she's always having conversations with people. A lot of this book is structured as just like conversations, and in the middle of a conversation, she's thinking about things, or she's replaying memories in her head. She'll think something and she'll mutter it out loud, and the person will be like, what did you say? That happens once, you're like, okay, this is a little bit fucking corny. That happens 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, a million times. It's grating on me. I think it's such a ridiculous way to show that someone is losing their grip on reality. It is so stupid. That's my main complaint with this book. I'm sorry, I'll keep going with the plot. She goes back to that same bar and she has another experience with these 3 men. She gets drunk, and the man, the fat man, grabs her wrist and knocks her to the ground with a pain that she has never known. So much worse than this chronic pain that she's always in. She cannot get up, and she knows that she has been filled with his pain. She ends up waking up in her bed the next day, not really knowing how she got there. His pain is gone, but her pain is still present. She actually wakes up to a text from her co-director Grace, who says, you're missing rehearsal right now, and then sends a photo of a script of Macbeth and says, did you okay this? She absolutely did not okay this. She had got a hint from her favorite student, the one student of hers that she likes, Ellie. Ellie said, they're going to make a complaint about you. The other students want to do Macbeth. They are not connecting with this play that you want to do, and they're going to go to the dean. There's a girl in the theater department, Brianna, and her parents are very wealthy, and they donate a lot of money to this department. So Brianna always gets the lead role, and she kind of just always gets what she wants. She has a lot of power here. Brianna really wants to do Macbeth, so she goes to the dean and makes a complaint. And the dean has been calling Miranda over and over and trying to get her to do Macbeth, and she has said no. She's gone to his office, they've had a meeting, she has said, I'm doing All's Well That Ends Well, and he's like, we really think you should do Macbeth. You know, we rely on support from the community, talking in all this fucking ridiculous professionalism way, but she absolutely refuses this. But it seems like the dean and Brianna on their own have decided that they're going to do Macbeth. So Miranda shows up to rehearsal, and everybody is on stage with their copies of the script of Macbeth, and it's obvious that Brianna is behind this. She's leading everybody around. Miranda gets there, and there is kind of an altercation between the two of them. She's really trying to like keep her cool, not betray how angry she is, but everyone can tell that like she is brimming with rage. She asks Brianna if she could take a look at the script, and Brianna like holds it tight to her chest, and this enrages Miranda because she's kind of like acting like a little victim, like acting like she's scared of her. And so Miranda reaches out and like grabs her wrist. Do you recognize that? Because I did not at first. She grabs Brianna's wrist. Brianna drops the papers everywhere. And then as this moment is happening, kind of like the peak of this altercation, the dean shows up in the door and he says, "Great news, everybody. We just got the biggest anonymous donation we have ever received, and the person who donated requested that we do All's Well That Ends Well as our play." I think it's kind of implied that the man who donated is the third man, that like tall, thin man. I feel like maybe I just don't know, but this feels like some sort of plot hole where it seems like if you donate enough money to a theater department, you can just pick what play they're going to do. That does not seem real to me. At least not mid-semester like this is. That seems crazy. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. I really don't know the inner workings of college theater. The dean even says, like, go all out with costumes and set design. We can get, like, a thrust, I think, which is a part of the stage that goes into the audience, and Miranda is thrilled. She dismisses everybody. She says, we're going to start again tomorrow at the next rehearsal. As she's there alone in the theater, she's picking up the papers that Brianna has dropped of Macbeth off the ground, and it's not until she finishes that she realizes that she's been able to pick these papers up off the ground. Her pain in her leg and her foot is completely gone. She still has pain in her back and her hip, but she can walk, she can straighten her leg, she can sit down, like this huge burden has been lifted off of her. She's grabbed Brianna's wrist and given her her pain. And this marks a point, of course, where things are completely turning around for Miranda. There's this guy, the set designer Hugo, who she has been like madly in love with in her entire time at the university. He starts seeing her, like actually looking at her, wanting to talk to her, expressing an interest in her. There is this kind of obvious allegory for the All's Well play. Everyone keeps talking about how the main character of All's Well, Helen, is not relatable. They don't understand why she's pining after her love interest because he completely ignores her. And Miranda keeps telling everybody she needs to convince him to see her. He doesn't see her. And then all of a sudden, Hugo sees her. It's quite obvious, but I don't hate it. I think it's fine. Like, it's kind of cute. It's clear that there is a large connection to All's Well that Miranda has. She's like obsessed with watching her own performance being Helen in All's Well before she was injured. You would think that she would be against doing Macbeth because that's the play that she got injured doing, but I think it's more this connection to All's Well That Ends Well. After having this crazy instantaneous recovery, she goes to her physiotherapist, who she's been seeing for a long time, and who at this point she feels very distanced from because she thinks that he thinks that it's all in her head, or that she doesn't want to get better because she has not been improving. She goes there and is expecting him to be so overjoyed at her progress, but he's not. It kind of seems like this is just another nail in the coffin for him thinking that she is faking it. This like random out of the blue recovery of the pain in her leg. He says, because you're feeling better, we can get a lot more aggressive with our treatment. And he starts fucking yanking at her, and she's telling him this is hurting me, or this is going to hurt me, and he does it anyway. He puts her right back to where she was. She can't straighten her leg. She can barely walk. It's so bad, she gets up from the table and she falls to the ground. And he reaches out his hand to her, and she grabs his wrist. And he is like instantly incoherent. He plops down into the chair. He's breathing heavily. Like, she's done it again. She's given him her pain. And I think that there's some sort of cosmic justice in this that is kind of nice to see. I feel like anyone with chronic pain kind of dreams of making someone else feel what they're feeling, like just to justify how bad it really is. Like, pain is so subjective, so you could really be like, what if someone else was feeling this and it wasn't even that bad for them? But then to see him completely like debilitated and immobilized because he's feeling her pain, especially because of how poorly he treats her as like a medical practitioner, it feels kind of good. but it's also like, damn, she has a power right now. And that's kind of where part 1 ends. When she leaves the physiotherapist's office, she goes back to the bar to try to ask those 3 men what is happening, but they're not there. I think that this has a really fun plot, and I'm very excited to pick it up. I just want to keep reading and to find out what happens next. I think that Mona Awad is a really good storyteller, but maybe not the best writer. Like I said about her just like muttering things to bring us back to a conversation, ridiculous. She also keeps calling Brianna's hair burnished. Honestly, it feels like 30 or 40 times she's called Brianna's hair burnished, and I feel like it's fucking tedious at this point. Every time I'm like, can we use a different adjective, please, for the love of God? I think this captures really well what it feels like to be inside a body with chronic pain and how that like affects your relationships with people and how you see them and how they see you. I think that not only does it describe being in a body with chronic pain really well, it describes being in a brain that's in a body with chronic pain very well. I'm enjoying following Miranda's character. I think that she is not very nice, and I think she also thinks quite highly of herself in a similar way to the main character of Bunny by Mona Awad. It's fun to follow. Like, I don't know, it feels like she writes characters that never really self-reflect, and they don't self-reflect both on like the way they're treating others and their interpersonal relationships, but also on the way that they're losing their grip on reality. So I will get back to you maybe when I finish part 2, but maybe just when I'm finished the book. Bye. Hello, I'm here to give you a little update on All's Well. I finished part 2 and got to part 3, and I just could not put it down, so I'm a little bit into part 3, but I haven't finished the book yet. It is very, very compelling, much more than it was in the beginning, and I was finding it really easy to read in the beginning, so it's really just picking up. All of part 2 is Miranda having recovered from this chronic pain, and she has gone insane with ecstasy. She's walking around singing, she's wild-eyed, she's full of energy. Everyone is a little bit afraid of her and a little bit confused, and no one really like stands up to her or says anything, but she can feel their like accusatory glances, or what she's perceiving to be their accusatory glances. She starts a relationship with the set designer Hugo, who she's been pining after forever. They end up having sex on the stage, and she loses her fucking underwear somewhere on the stage. They can't find it anywhere. Brianna, this girl that she had absolutely hated, is gone now. She is so sick, she's completely like bedbound, doesn't come to rehearsal ever. So Ellie has been taking the place of the lead, and Ellie is Miranda's dream lead. This is who she sees in the role of Helen. Miranda is so thrilled with how the play is coming together, mostly because Ellie is now in the role of Helen, though Ellie doesn't officially get the role of Helen until 2 weeks before the actual performance starts, and for some reason the co-director Grace is shocked by Miranda giving the role to Ellie, even though Brianna hasn't been there at all. Like, she has truly never rehearsed this play. So how was she ever going to have the lead? I don't know, and I feel like that was kind of a plot hole and was a bit distracting for me. That day that Miranda announces that Ellie is going to be playing Helen in front of the entire theater group, Brianna, who hasn't been here in weeks, months probably, appears behind her and watches this happen. And she comes in limping, clearly ill and in pain, the exact same way that Miranda was. And they're like, oh my god, Brianna, what are you doing here? Everyone is shocked to see her, and to see her in this state. She says, I'm the lead. Miranda says, you're not the lead. It's 2 weeks out. You cannot possibly be the lead in this play. She says, fine, I want to play the king, which is like kind of a sickly old man. Perfect for Brianna, who is very, very ill. They say, like, you have not been at rehearsal. She says, I've had lots of time on my hands. I've memorized it all. I'll do like a performance. So they make her perform a scene, and she does do it genuinely really well. Better acting than she's ever shown before. Miranda sees that this works and it's good, but she does not want Brianna to have anything good. She doesn't want to give this to her. She says, we'll think on it, but you're really sick and we don't know if this will be good for you to do. The whole time Brianna's been there, she has been staring accusatory daggers at Miranda, and Miranda knows that Brianna thinks that she had done something to her when she grabbed her wrist, which we know that she had done something to her. Obviously nothing provable though. Brianna then, when she hears that she's not 100% getting the role of the king, starts throwing these accusations out, calling her a fucking witch, saying that she's the reason that she's sick. Miranda and Grace are both like, whoa, like, this is fucking crazy. Brianna leaves, and Miranda ends up going to the bar where she met those 3 men. She finds them in some basement room that she didn't know existed, that's supposed to be like a games room. There's a pool table in there. And she is, like, confessing everything, saying, how did this happen? What have you done to me? Why don't I hurt anymore? They're saying, like, you've shifted the pain over from body to body. It's this whole fucking big scene. Miranda turns around, and Grace, her co-director, is standing in the doorway, having witnessed it all. Which is kind of corny, but whatever. Grace runs. It's clear she knows that Miranda is responsible somehow for Brianna's pain. But Miranda, now like an able-bodied woman, is able to chase Grace out and stop her from getting into her car. Grace just wants to leave, and Miranda wants to absolve herself. She's frantically and like very quickly speaking, telling her, you didn't see what you think you saw. It's just us practicing this little play that we're doing. Like, don't worry about it. How would I even have hurt Brianna? Grace has not thrown out any accusations or said anything about what she's seen, but Miranda is just going and going and going and going, can't stop. She, like, reaches out to touch Grace, who is very clearly afraid of her, and backs up, and she backs up so quickly she falls over, and Miranda leans down and grabs her by the wrist to pull her back up. And that's where part 2 ends. We know that Miranda has transferred some pain into Grace's body. Part 3 begins with a meeting with the dean, which Brianna, when they last saw her in the theater, was like threatening. She was saying, you're gonna go to jail, like, you're screwed, I'm telling everyone. She gets to this meeting, and the dean is like, I'm sorry, this is like some serious accusation, but I'm sorry that you have to deal with this. It's obviously crazy. Brianna gets there. She's limping, she's clearly in pain, she's clearly exhausted. Her parents are with her, these rich people who fund the theater department. Brianna starts this accusation train saying she made me sick, and the dean is asking her to clarify over and over again. And Brianna's realizing how kind of insane she sounds, saying that she's a witch and that somehow touching her wrist hurt Brianna's like hip, back, and leg, but she sticks with it because she felt it. She felt what happened to her body when Miranda grabbed her wrist. Obviously, no one believes Brianna, just like no one believed Miranda about her pain. Miranda looks very good here. She totally keeps her cool. When she gives someone else her pain, it brings her up to this really, really high level. It's like she's fucking floating. Like she actually does think that she's floating. She's elated and nothing can bring her down from this. So she keeps her cool, and she seems very generous and very noble in deflecting Brianna's accusations, but also still, after being called a witch and like a fucking asshole and a monster and a bitch, she still offers Brianna the role of the king. Also at this meeting is someone named Fauve, who I haven't mentioned because I still don't really understand what her relationship is to the theater department. I think she's maybe like assistant director. We know Fauve has been a character. I just haven't brought her up. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to describe her. She is a very frustrating and like quietly sinister person that is so fun to read about and so like enraging, like absolutely irritating to hear the things that she says to people in this way where she's like hiding what she really says with this plausible deniability, but it's obvious what she means. Like, she's someone who absolutely never believed that Miranda was actually in pain, and she would always just say little things like, oh, how are you doing? Miranda's like, oh, the pain. She's like, was it your hip or your leg? I can never remember. She wants Miranda's job and thinks that she deserves it because Miranda is not from academia. She was just an actor, and Fauve is from academia. So there's also the tension there. Fauve has backed Brianna entirely in this, like has gone and visited her house. It's clear believes Brianna that Miranda has done something to cause her this pain. After Brianna and her parents leave, Miranda goes to leave, but Fauve is like, actually, we have more to talk about, and pulls out a baggie. Within the baggie is Miranda's underwear that she left on stage when she had sex with Hugo. This is like a shocking moment, but somehow Miranda gets away with this too. She just plays it off coolly. She says, we change backstage all the time. It could be anyone's. Like, how do you possibly know it's mine? She looks Fauve in the eyes and can see that Fauve watched them have sex, like hidden somewhere in the dark of the theater, but Fauve cannot admit that in front of the dean. So the dean ends up being like, oh my god, this is like ridiculous. Fauve ends up losing standing with the dean here, and Miranda gets off scot-free with everything. That's the point that I'm at. This is, like I said, the pace is picking up. I'm really, really enjoying it. I like the characters, though I do have some complaints, which I think I'm going to get into later after I finish the book. I'll tell you all the things that I like about it and that I don't like about it. I'll see you then. I feel like it probably seems like all these clips have been filmed in the same day because the cat is always right there. He just likes that spot right now. That's where he wants to be. Okay, I finished All's Well by Mona Awad. Last I left you, she had just come out on top after this meeting with the dean. Now, things are amping up with this production. It is Tech Week, which really put me in the head of being a theater kid, my brief stint as a theater kid in high school, and it was horrible, and I wanted to stop thinking about it. It's frantic. Everyone is panicking about everything. Miranda, though, is still on cloud nine in this ecstatic state, acting like she's high all the time. She's pushing Brianna way too far in rehearsal. She has absolutely no empathy for her whatsoever, which is obviously incredibly ironic. And then Ellie is also having a bunch of issues because she feels like it's her fault that Brianna is sick. Ellie's kind of like a witchy little college student, and she thinks that her wishing or manifesting or casting a spell or something is the reason that Brianna got sick, because it meant that she had the lead role. As Miranda's grip on reality is dissolving, so too is her relationship with Hugo, who she keeps seeing as her ex-husband Paul. She'll look at him and see Paul. She'll call him Paul. He's noticing. He doesn't like this. It's making him really uncomfortable. So he kind of leaves her. Also during this time of Tech Week, Grace is totally gone. She should be there. She's the stage manager, or whatever I was calling her, co-director. I don't know. She's an adult in charge here. She's not there. Miranda has not gone to visit her since dropping her off at her house when she first hurt her. But she has been sending her Instacart deliveries and flowers and get well soon balloons, but she hasn't actually gone inside to see Grace. No one has heard anything from Grace. The day before opening night, Miranda goes straight off the deep end and into the ocean, where she spends the night sleeping in the ocean. And then the day leading up to opening night, she's on the beach collecting shells. She arrives at the theater drenched in water, salt encrusted clothes, seaweed in her hair. Complete disaster. She's like, I'm great. I'm doing so great. Everything's so great. Wild-eyed. Everyone's really worried about her, but mostly they're focused on the opening night, which is about to start, and everything is going to shit. Ellie is panicking because Brianna has gotten worse, and it doesn't seem like she can even go onto the stage. She's well and truly fucked, and Ellie is so guilt-ridden because of this. There's also way too many people. People are just filing into the theater. People who do not have the proper tickets. More people than the theater can seat. It's standing room only. It's absolutely packed. A minute before the show starts, Miranda hears music. And this is music that she's been hearing kind of underneath everything in her life for a long time. But when she hears it this time, it is overwhelming. It's all she can hear. And she's like, I have to go stop that music. How are we going to do the production with this loud music playing? And Ellie is like, there's no music playing, but Miranda's certain. So she goes to the black box, which is not something that I am familiar with. Seems like it's just a smaller stage, a smaller theater. So Miranda goes out there and she sees that there's an audience out there and there's a set on the stage. And she's like, fuck, I bet this was Fauve. She's running a play on my opening night. What a bitch. She goes out onto the stage and the set is Grace's living room. And on Grace's couch is Grace, lying there, open-eyed, staring at the ceiling, dead. This kicks off a very surreal sequence of a play with Miranda at the center of it. It's shifting very quickly from scene to scene. So it shifts from Grace's living room to then all of Miranda's doctors, who have just ended up hurting her more or not believing her, surrounding a gurney. On it, a woman, which Miranda knows is her because she can feel the poking and prodding that they're doing. And while they're doing this, they bring back her pain and knock her to the ground. Then it shifts into just a bassinet on the stage with a baby crying in it. And Miranda goes to the bassinet and picks up the baby, and she's familiar with this baby, but she's not 100% sure why. And then Paul, her ex-husband, appears, calls the baby Ellie. It's not indicating that Ellie is somehow Miranda's daughter. It's just kind of a weird, absurd little moment where she's holding baby Ellie, and baby Ellie loves her, and Paul loves her. This is a world where she hasn't had her injury, and her ex-husband are still together. And in this world, they're preparing for her opening night playing Helen in All's Well. Paul is like running lines with her, telling her she's going to do so great. And she's like very happy here with the baby and with her husband that she has like been pining after ever since she left him. But she left him because he didn't love her anymore because of her injury. Whatever. But then Grace is in the corner, and every moment that brings Miranda closer to the baby or closer to Paul, she can see it hurting Grace more and more, and she knows that if she keeps going through with this, Grace will die. So she manages excruciatingly to pull herself away from this happy life to go and save Grace. But it's too late. And then Miranda hears applause, and she thinks, oh, this is my moment. I'm about to go play Helen. The play is starting. So she goes back to the main stage where all of her students are lined up holding hands, bowing. The play has finished, but Miranda is sure that this is just the start. So she goes out and everyone's clapping for her. And then everyone's looking at her really concerned, but they're just trying to like breeze by it. Ellie's trying to save the day by like handing her flowers off to Miranda and making it seem like she should be here in this moment. Ellie tells Miranda, I fixed it. And then Miranda sees Brianna running toward her, and she recognizes Brianna as someone that she sees as an enemy. So she backs away from her and off of the stage. She wakes up, and Ellie is there saying, you wouldn't believe it. There were 3 men in the audience at the very front who were doctors. Okay, I can't wink. That was embarrassing. And the doctor said, you're going to be okay. You haven't broken any bones, but after the shock wears off, the pain will come back. And Miranda says, what did the doctors think of the show? Because she knows that it's these 3 men. And Ellie says, actually, they wanted me to tell you that they didn't like it. They found that it was really anticlimactic, and they thought that it was just not a good show, and that they were going to contact you for a refund. So Miranda knows that her days that are pain-free are limited. And then Grace shows up. She's not dead, and she's healed, just like Brianna is. Ellie has done something to heal them. She healed Brianna on stage, which matched up with the play, like Brianna's character is healed at one point. Grace is back, and all is forgiven. She takes Miranda out to the bar where they normally go, where Miranda has met these 3 men a few times. It seems like Grace has entered the state that Miranda was in when she first became pain-free, which is like this ecstasy, living on a high. It's not like Grace is back to normal. Something is obviously very off with her, but she's very happy and loving. She apologizes to Miranda for not believing her about her pain. She says that when she was ill, she had a taste of what Miranda had been going through. Miranda is still not all there, though. She's still pain-free, but she knows that that's not going to last forever. And when Grace leaves the bar, Miranda stays there, and the book ends with Miranda waiting in the bar for the 3 men to come. I had a lot of fun with this book, but I don't think that it was necessarily like a well-crafted piece of literature. I think that it had a lot of issues. Maybe it was just like an editing problem, but none of those issues really made me feel like I disliked the book or I was like super annoyed with them, except that cliche thing at the start that I didn't really like. There's a lot of repetition that can be like a little bit grating, but nothing like destroyed my enjoyment of this book. I didn't love that she would often reuse phrases that I would like originally think were really well put or like beautiful prose. She would use it again when it felt like this was like a standalone line that you should have just left with the one use. Like she says, the bowl of my palm, and I liked that phrasing, and then she uses it again and it just takes that specialness away. Or she says like 2 or 3 times, a voice like a hand stroking my face. You have to come up with new ways to say things. You can't just because something's good doesn't mean you can keep using it. That was something that annoyed me a little bit with this. I think the book thinks that it's clever, but it's not all that clever. I also think that it's supposed to be funny, and I didn't really find any humor in it, but that's really my subjective experience. I'm not using that as a point against this book. None of these are really points against it because it's fun. And like, really, is that not what matters? This is entertainment, and I was so entertained by it. I think the pacing had like some issues, like it's a bit slow in the beginning, but I felt like there was a lot of momentum pushing me through it the whole time, and I wanted to pick it up and I wanted to know what happens. I really like how Mona Awad writes her leading women. I liked the characterization of Miranda, how she's kind of mean and she's paranoid, and you understand where she's coming from often, but then sometimes you don't. I liked watching her descent into madness. It was very just fun. It was a fun book, even though it was heavy because it was about chronic pain. You can feel the desperation of the characters who are in pain, and that is hard to read. But then it's also hard to read when they're pain-free, when Miranda is like healed and recovered. Like, it's still the pain, the idea of pain, the threat of pain is still such a leading force in her life. I think Mona Awad's got spunk and she's got originality as a writer. I think she is a better storyteller than she is a writer. Maybe she just needs a new editor, but her writing has not, in the 2 books I've read from her, felt like ultra skilled. But I want to pick them up. I want to read them. I'm very interested in them. So there's a lot of points there. I've read some beautifully written, boring fucking books, and I would prefer this over that. For the last book of this video, I'm going to read Out by Natsuo Kirino, and I have to read this because it is so overdue at the library that they've marked it as lost. So, like, I gotta get through this, and I gotta take it back to the fucking library. So I'll see you when I'm a bit farther through it. I haven't read any of it, so I'll see you when I'm any amount into it. Hello, I'm like a quarter of the way through Out, and I'm here to give you an update about it. This is a little bit of a slower read. It's taking me longer than I expected. It's a 400-page book, but the pages are quite densely packed with text. Like, I feel like the font is a little bit small, and I think other versions of this book are closer to like 500 pages, which it feels like this is taking the time a 500-page book would take. But I am still very much enjoying it, and the tension is building wonderfully. This starts out by introducing us to a group of women working the night shift at a bento box factory. It's obviously like horrible, backbreaking work, and there's also like a pervert who is attacking women on their way into work, so they have to walk to work in pairs so they don't get pulled into the fucking woods. There's kind of a sense of desperation with these women, which I think is typical of anyone working a night shift. There's nothing worse. Like, you can't not convince me that there's anything worse than working a night shift. The floor manager is so overbearing and cruel, and they're like constantly worried about being a minute late for any aspect of their job. One of the women, Yayoi, who is described as this very beautiful woman, the most beautiful woman who works the night shift. She's really off on this first day of work that we're privy to. She has been fighting with her husband because he has gambled all of their savings away, and he hit her very hard, leaving a huge bruise on her stomach. After this shift is over, that's when Yayoi is telling her group of friends what has happened and why she's so off. We then follow each woman individually and learn a little bit more about them. So it starts with Kuniko, who is like an early 30s woman who thinks that she's very ugly, and that's why she can't get a job doing anything better. But she wants a new job. She's looking for a new job. She's going to interviews and they're rejecting her because what she thinks is because she's fat and ugly, which very well might be true. It kind of seems like that is true. She wants luxury, and this has put her into a lot of debt that is overwhelming her life. Then we hear from Yoshi's perspective. She's older, maybe like 50s, and she has a teenage daughter and takes care of her mother-in-law. She's widowed. So she's working this horrible job as the night shift, going home, sleeping for a little bit, and then taking care of her bedridden mother-in-law. Then it switches perspective to someone completely different, who's this club owner, Satake, and it's kind of a chapter about him dealing with his different clubs, particularly dealing with, he has 2 clubs, and one of them is like more gambling, and one of them is like women. It's unclear, but also pretty clear what happens in that club. And he's dealing with this man who has been a problem in both clubs, this man named Yamamoto. And as the chapter progresses, you kind of realize that Yamamoto is Yayoi's husband, who has gambled all of their money away. And he not only is gambling, he's also obsessed with one of the workers at the women club, and he's like following her home and stalking her. I'm unsure of its importance for the rest of the novel, but we learn that Satake, the club owner, has some dark secrets. He's killed a woman in the past, and he loved the power of it so much that he's now like impotent. After Satake's chapter, it goes to Yayoi, who is at home enraged and upset about this bruise, about this abuse that she's facing from her husband, and about his behavior. She knows that he's obsessed with this other woman, and she also knows that he's like literally gambled away all of their savings. When he gets home from the club, being beaten up by Satake at the club, she sees him and she just wraps her belt around his neck and strangles him to death. Upon doing this, she immediately calls Masako, who is kind of like the mom friend. She's very level-headed and logical, but she's also kind and generous. And Masako essentially says, "What do you want to do? I'll help you with whatever you need to do." And Yayoi says, "I need to get rid of his body. I just want to live as if he had gone somewhere else. Like, I have 2 young children. I can't go to jail for this." So Masako immediately agrees to help her. They stick Yamamoto's body into the trunk of Masako's car, and then they go to work because they can't be late for work. They're trying to play everything off normally, as if Yayoi has an alibi. So they go to work, and the entire shift his body is in the trunk of her car. And this night on the way into work, Misako goes alone and is grabbed by the pervert, who she realizes is one of her coworkers. She manages to get him off of her by promising that she'll meet him there at 9 the next night, and he lets her go, but he does assault her. But she feels like she can't tell anyone because she doesn't want to draw attention to herself while she's literally hiding a body in the trunk of her car. They get out of work, and Misako says to Yui, "You have to go home and play the part of a worried wife, and I will deal with getting rid of his body." Masako's plan is to chop up the body and put it into garbage bags and put it in different garbage cans all over the city. She realizes that she's not going to be able to lift Yamamoto's body out of the trunk on her own, and she needs Yayoi to go home and have this alibi play this role. Misako tells Yoshi what is happening because she needs someone to help her move this body, and Yoshi has just borrowed money from her, so feels like she cannot refuse doing this favor for Misako, though she really, really doesn't want to. Kuniko can tell that everybody else is in on something that she's being left out of, and she feels very jealous about it. While Misako and Yoshi start this brutal process of dismembering Yamamoto's body in Misako's house, Kuniko drops by to ask to borrow some money because the debt collectors are after her. She needs to pay, like, I think 55,000 yen that day, or bad things are gonna happen. When Kuniko gets there, she sees Misako's car out front and also Yoshi's bike out front. She remembers that she's being left out of something, and she really, really wants to get to Misako, who's not answering the door because she's actually in the middle of chopping up a body. So she goes walking around the house, snooping, sees that there's a light on in the bathroom, and comes to the bathroom window and starts, like, yelling up at them, saying, "Will you please let me in? I need to ask you something." They have no idea what to do, so they, like, 10 minutes later, let her into the house. Kuniko is already obviously, like, super suspicious about what's going on and really wanting to know what's happening, so they let her in on the secret, and they tell her, "You can have the money. Misako will give her the money if she helps with the rest of this process, with getting rid of the body." And she needs the money so bad that she agrees, and it really seems like Kuniko is going to be the problem in this entire scenario, because she was shown what was happening in the most gruesome way. Everyone else was told about it and had time to process it, where she was like, "What's going on?" And they brought her into a room with a, like, brutally dismembered, disgusting body. And this sort of plays itself out at the first moment that Kuniko is left alone to deal with something, where she goes completely against the plan. Once they've dismembered the body, they have it bagged up. Misako tells everybody, "Take some bags, and when night falls, put them in the garbage away from here, not near your houses. Make sure that you're not seen doing it." But Kuniko just wants to get rid of the bags immediately. She doesn't want them in her nice car, so she goes to a park in broad daylight and walks around the park, placing the bags in the garbage cans, which is very different than the plan, which was to place them at, like, garbage pickup sites where they were going to be picked up the next day. And then that night, while heading into work, what could also be another problem is that Misako drops Yamamoto's keys and his wallet into this culvert that she thinks will just take them away in water, but it's, like, very much on the way to work where she does this, and she doesn't see, hiding in the bushes, that pervert that she told to meet her there the next night. I don't have a ton of thoughts about this yet. I think that it is quite well written and the translation is really good. I've read translated Japanese literature that is quite, like, stilted in the dialogue, and I don't think this has that. It feels quite natural. It is definitely a bit slow though, and a little bit I'm not really wanting to pick it up. Once I'm reading, I'm enjoying it. I just, like, I don't know, I think I'm in the mood for something a little bit faster paced than this. I will enjoy it by the end of it. I have no idea what's gonna happen. I love a cover-up story. I love a paranoia story. So I'm excited. I've finished Out by Natsuo Kirino. There is so much to cover, I'm just gonna get right into it. Okay, we learn that the man who grabbed Misako is not the pervert. This was a one-time thing. He's not the guy who's been doing it to everybody else. He is a very sick individual. His name's Kazuo, and he's an immigrant from Brazil. And he really regrets what he's done to Misako, so he becomes committed to getting her forgiveness for this. And in doing so, he becomes obsessed with her and falls in love with her. Then we switch perspectives over to Kuniko, who shows up at Yayoi's house and blackmails her and makes her co-sign another loan. Kuniko is just racking up these loans, and it's this vicious cycle, so irresponsible with money. And Yayoi can't do anything. She's in a position where, like, she can't call the police, she can't say anything to Kuniko, she just has to co-sign this loan for her. Yayoi tells Misako about this, and Misako realizes how suspicious this looks, that this woman who is supposed to be dealing with so much with the disappearance of her husband has co-signed a loan for her friend. So she goes with Kuniko over to the loan shark to take the contract back. And the loan shark, Jumanji, realizes that he knows Masako from an old job that they used to work together. Then the police show up at Yuyoi's house and they tell her that they have found a body that they think might be her husband's. They found the bags that Kuniko dropped off at the park. So this has now become a murder investigation. The police are getting suspicious. One of them is certain that this was done at the hands of the man who owns the club, Satake, and the other one is suspicious of the wife. So they go to Satake's club and they shut the whole thing down and they arrest him because it's an unlicensed club. And it is pretty suspicious. Yamamoto left his coat there, and also people saw Satake beating him up on the night that he went missing. So Satake's arrested mainly on this illegal gambling club charge, but also on suspicion of this murder. Then we go back to Kazuo's perspective, the man that grabbed Masako. He's obsessed with her. She's all he can think about. He ends up fishing the key that she dropped into the ditch out of the water and wearing it around his neck. This is Yamamoto's key to his house. So that's just another thread in the story to be worried about in the back of your mind. You don't know where everything is going to fall apart. There's lots of little things that could lead the police back to the criminals here. Satake is eventually released from prison, but he's lost everything. So he becomes committed to figuring out who really did this murder. We're getting thrown all over the place. I'm sorry if this is hard to follow. It's not that hard to follow in the book. Now, Jumanji shows up at Kuniko's door, and he has a suspicion. He thinks he knows what has happened here. So he tells Kuniko, who is drowning in debt, that he will cancel her debt if she tells him what happened, and she can't say no. As soon as he says this, I knew, like, you just know Kuniko is going to do this. She's so money obsessed, and she has money coming in from helping with the crime that she's obviously going to want to use that money on herself. And she does. She tells him. And Jumanji does not use this information to blackmail Masako. He goes to Masako with a business proposal. He knows some men in the mob, and he says that they could start a business out of getting rid of bodies, disappearing bodies. He has contacts that can get him bodies that need to be gotten rid of, and that people will pay a high price to get rid of. And Masako can chop them up into pieces, and then they can spread them out through the garbages in the city. And she agrees to this. And they end up doing it again, and they get a lot of money out of it. So through all of this, Masako is getting more and more paranoid because she feels like people are following her around and that somebody is onto her, and she thinks that it's the police. There's people appearing in the lives of all of the women who are connected to this crime, the main one being this woman who shows up in Yuyoi's neighborhood like a new neighbor, and they become quite close friends. And this is wonderful for Yuyoi because she has been ostracized from her community because they don't like the way she has reacted to her husband's murder. She has like a new haircut and she seems a lot more sure of herself and confident after he's gone, and they obviously don't like this and are very suspicious about it. So this friendship with this woman is beautiful for her. There's also another woman who shows up at Masako's door and is just asking about the lot across the street because she wants to buy it. Masako learns that there's been somebody going around her neighborhood asking her neighbors what they think about her, pretending to be like her boss who's planning on giving her a raise, and like wondering what her neighbors think about that. And then there's a new security guard at work, and Masako is really suspicious about him. She thinks that she's seen him somewhere or something. We learn that she's right to be suspicious about him because that is Satake. And Satake has hired detectives to look into each of these women. That's who the woman that was friends with the Yoi is. That's who the person going around Masako's neighborhood is. But after Satake sees Masako in person, he becomes convinced that she's the reincarnation of the woman that he killed 20 years ago. And this very quickly becomes a lot more about Satake's past than it is about getting revenge on the real people who killed Yamamoto. Satake has moved into an apartment in the same building as Kuniko, and Kuniko thinks that he's flirting with her, so she ends up going back to his place where he strangles and kills her in preparation for what he's going to do to Masako, and also to teach them a lesson, because what he then does is find Jumanji's contact and give them the body to disappear. They take this body wrapped up into Masako's house to cut up, and it's Kuniko, and he's obviously sending them a message that he knows everything. He becomes overcome with this fantasy of torturing and killing Masako. He ends up choking her and dragging her into an abandoned factory as she's walking to work. And he assaults her over and over, trying to recreate his feelings that first time that he killed a woman. And at this point, this is the very end of the book, it feels like this book is going to end with the assault, torture, and murder of like the main woman in the book all told from his perspective, and I did not want to keep reading. I didn't like that. It made me feel really icky. This whole book made me feel icky, but this was like sickening in a different way that I was not comfortable with, and I just wanted to put it down. Thank God, though, it does end up going back to Masako's perspective. We get to hear from her while this is happening. We learn that while this is happening, she is trying to get inside his head because she thinks it's the only way that she can survive is by understanding him. She ends up coming to a sort of empathy with him, which I don't know how I feel about. What happens in the end is that she manages to pull a scalpel out of her pocket and cut him and kill him. And as he's dying, she's regretting this. She's saying like we could have lived a life together and saying that her and him were the same. Now through the whole book, Masako has been grappling with who she is as a person and why she would decide to help Yayoi at the drop of a hat do this horrible, horrible crime. And I guess the end is her coming to her conclusions about that. I just didn't like it. I feel like I need to think about it more. I need to like internalize what happened. I just thought that it was gross and I felt gross afterwards. I don't like a sexual assault being played as anything that has like a positive outcome, especially in this case. It just didn't really make sense to me, and I didn't understand what Kirino was trying to do with the characters here. Though that's not to say that I didn't enjoy the rest of the book. I thought that this was really well done. It really captures the exhaustion and the desperation of poverty. Money is the driving force in this book. None of this would have happened if these women had enough money to live off of and to be comfortable. It's all driven by a need for money. Even just working the night shift at this horrible factory, which is so pivotal to their lives, it really shows you like dehumanization of that and of being poor and of being a woman in a society that treats you unfairly, and how being treated unfairly in that society leads you to working in these conditions. It really shows us how each woman ended up working here, and it's so intricately tied into their gender. Masako ended up working there because she was doing too good of a job at her old job, and people didn't like this senior woman being good at what she was doing and like having a voice. Kuniko has to work there because she's not beautiful enough to work anywhere else, and Yoshi ends up working the night shift because she has this like overwhelming caretaking job that she has to do. This really gets into the heads of all of the characters, and there are so many characters. I liked seeing things from all of their perspectives. Obviously, I'm not going to care about all of them equally, and sometimes I didn't want to read about certain people. I just didn't care about certain people. But the chapters are not long enough to mean that I was like suffering through a large portion of this. There are some very dark psychological like portraits of these fucked up, sick people. I thought that there was a lot of empathy given to men who assault people in this book. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Sometimes I think that can be done well. I don't totally know if I think it was done incredibly well here. I felt sickened by the way these men were treated. It's very dark and disturbing and perverse, and it shows you like the underbelly of Japanese society in the 90s, and I just thought that it was enjoyable, but also not at all. Also, I felt really gross reading this, and it was sickening and disgusting and gory. I think that if you're into like a thriller that has a lot of tension but not a super quick plot, and you really like characterization, this is a great book for you. And that is all I have to say. I'm done. I'm sorry to say it, but I hate this video at this point. I have had so many fucking technical difficulties while recording this, not even including the fact that I had to pivot and make it an entirely new video. Everything has gone wrong. I feel like I've had to record every single segment of this twice. And I'm saying this for the second time because somehow I didn't record this clip the first time. I only recorded the audio. So this literally is my second time talking to you about this. I'm done. I am done with this. I'm so happy to get it off my fucking plate. I'm sorry if it was boring. I just could not make myself care about this video for as long as it took me to make. Thank you for watching it anyway. Goodbye.